The notification chimed on my phone while I was reviewing a federal contractor's expense report. Thursday afternoon, 3 days before Thanksgiving, I set down my highlighter and picked up the device. Donovan, Thanksgiving dinner at Celestine's parents' place. Thursday, 6 p.m. You coming? Not an invitation. A notification, like I was being added to a calendar event. Not welcome to a family gathering. I typed back carefully. I'd be happy to attend. Thank you for including me. The reply came instantly. Donovan, cool. Dress nice. The Sterlings are kind of formal. I looked around my modest one-bedroom apartment in downtown Minneapolis. 900 square feet. IKEA furniture. Second-hand bookshelf. Windows overlooking a parking lot. Nothing suggested that the man living here pulled down $50,000 monthly. As a GS-15 senior auditor with the Government Accountability Office, nothing suggested I had $3.8 million in various accounts and investments. That was intentional. 23 years ago, when Donovan was 9 and his mother died of ovarian cancer, I'd made a decision. I would raise my son without the cushion of visible wealth. He would learn independence, self-reliance, the value of working for everything he earned. So I'd moved to this apartment, driven a 2007 Honda Civic, shopped at Target, eaten at diners, lived like a man making $40,000 annually, not $500,000. Donovan had grown up believing we had enough, but not much more. He'd worked through college. Well, I'd secretly paid his tuition through an anonymous scholarship fund, but he'd worked for his spending money. He'd rented apartments, climbed the career ladder at his marketing firm, married Celestine 2 years ago. He'd become independent, self-sufficient, exactly what I'd hoped for. Except somewhere along the way, he'd also become embarrassed by me. I noticed it first about a year ago, the way he'd suggest we meet at restaurants on the edge of town, never near his office. How he'd mentioned me less and less to Celestine's family. The apologetic tone when he explained where I lived. Dad's very practical, he'd said once, when I overheard him on the phone with Celestine. Minimalist lifestyle. It works for him, not a lie, but not the truth either. My phone buzzed again. Donovan BTW, park on the street, not in their driveway. Space is limited. I stared at that message, read it 3 times. Park on the street. Don't embarrass us with your old Honda in front of the 3-car garage. I opened my laptop and created a new document, titled it simply, Thanksgiving 2024. Documentation, November 18th, Monday, 4:47 p.m. Text from Donovan Blackwood. Content, Thanksgiving invitation. Instruction to dress nice. Instruction to park on street, not driveway. 23 years of federal auditing had taught me one thing above all others. Document everything, every discrepancy, every anomaly, every moment that suggested a pattern of behavior requiring investigation. This was my first entry. I saved the file, backed it up to 3 separate drives, then walked to my closet. On the left hung my work suits, tailored, professional, appropriate for congressional testimony. On the right, pushed to the back, the older clothes, a jacket I'd bought at Goodwill 15 years ago, pants with a small stain on the knee, shoes with worn heels. I pulled out the jacket, held it up to the light. Perfect. The next 3 days passed in careful preparation. I reviewed my finances, not to access them, but to remember exactly what I'd built, while appearing to have nothing. Government Accountability Office salary, $50,000 month, $600,000 annually. Investment portfolio, $2,100,000. Retirement accounts, $980,000. Savings, $720,000. Total assets, $3,800,000. The house where Donovan and Celestine lived. My house, the one I'd bought 20 years ago, worth. They'd been living there rent-free for 18 months, while saving for their own place. Combined income between his marketing job and her boutique consulting work, probably $120,000 annually. 18 months meant $180,000 had flowed through their accounts, with 0 housing costs. I didn't know where that money had gone, but I suspected Thanksgiving would give me answers. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. November in Minneapolis, temperature hovering around freezing. I dressed in my old jacket, worn shoes, a tie that had gone out of style a decade ago, looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I saw a man who appeared to be doing his best with limited means. Perfect. The drive to Edina took 30 minutes. The neighborhoods transformed as I headed southwest, from modest downtown apartments to sprawling suburban homes, to the kind of estates that announced wealth from the street. The Sterling residence occupied a corner lot in one of Edina's most exclusive neighborhoods. Two-story colonial, circular driveway. Professionally landscaped grounds, even in late November. A silver Lexus and a black Mercedes occupied the driveway. I parked my 2007 Honda Civic 2 houses down, as instructed. Walked up the street carrying a store-bought pumpkin pie I'd picked up at Super Target for set. Donovan met me at the door before I could knock. His expression was tight, controlled. "Dad, you made it." Traffic was light. I held up the pie. "I brought dessert." He glanced at the plastic container, then away. "Thanks. Come in." Percival Sterling filled the space behind Donovan. Tall, silver-haired, expensive casual wear that probably cost more than my entire outfit. His handshake was firm to the point of aggressive. "Matthias, welcome. Still driving that old Honda? I see. It runs well. Reliable. Japanese engineering. They build them to last." He said it like a compliment that wasn't quite a compliment. "Come in. Come in." The interior screamed wealth with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to shout. Hardwood floors, crown molding, art that looked original, furniture that belonged in architectural magazines. Marguerite Sterling appeared beside her husband, blonde, polished, wearing casual elegance like armor. Her smile was practiced, professional. "Matthias, so good of you to come." She took my pie with 2 fingers, like it might contaminate her. How thoughtful, store-bought, very practical. Celestine stood behind them, her face carefully neutral, beautiful in that way that came from money and time. Personal trainer, professional stylist, the kind of maintenance that cost thousands monthly. "Hi, Matthias." "Not Dad. Never Dad. Just my name." Distant and formal. They ushered me into a living room that could have housed my entire apartment. I was directed to a chair in the corner fabric, worn at the arms, noticeably different from the leather furniture arranged in the main seating area. "Drink?" Percival moved to a bar cart that held crystal decanters. "I've got an excellent scotch, Macallan 25. Or maybe something simpler." "Water is fine, thank you." "Water it is." He poured himself 3 fingers of amber liquid. "So Matthias, government work. Donovan mentioned you're at some agency downtown. The Government Accountability Office." "I'm a senior auditor." Percival laughed, a big sound that demanded attention. "Government accountant. Well, someone has to do it, I suppose. Steady work at least. Probably get decent benefits." "The benefits are adequate." Marguerite settled onto the main sofa, crossing her leg. "Public service is so admirable when more lucrative options aren't available." I sipped my water, said nothing. Donovan sat beside Celestine on the love seat, avoiding my gaze. His posture was rigid, uncomfortable. He'd positioned himself with them, not with me. "Tell me, Matthias," Percival continued, swirling his scotch. "What happened? You must have had bigger plans when you were younger. A man doesn't aim for government accounting." I chose my path deliberately. "Interesting choice." His tone suggested otherwise. I went the opposite direction. Started in commercial real estate at 25. First development at 30. Now I've got Sterling Properties. 12 buildings across the Twin Cities. 7-figure portfolio. "Different philosophies," I said quietly. "Indeed." He drank. "Different results too." Dinner was served in a dining room with a table that could seat 14. The meal was catered. I saw the discreet labels on the warming dishes. Turkey, sides, wine that probably cost more per bottle than my weekly grocery budget. They placed me at the far end. A folding chair, slightly lower than the others, brought in to accommodate the extra guest. My store-bought pie sat on the sideboard, ignored beside an elaborate selection of professional desserts. If this story reminded you of the injustices you've seen, follow the channel and turn on notifications. Because wherever justice is delayed, a new revenge story begins. Percival dominated conversation, gesturing with his fork, refilling his glass repeatedly. Just closed on a new property downtown, 8-story office building, $12 million. Should start generating serious returns by Q2. He looked at Donovan. You should come work for me. Real money in commercial real estate, not like marketing. I'm doing fine in marketing, Donovan said quietly. Marguerite dabbed her lips with a linen napkin. Better than some family examples. Certainly. She glanced at me. The meaning was clear. Donovan has always been capable. I said. Celestine's fork clinked against her plate. Capable but unsupported. Some people inherit advantages. Donovan had to build everything himself. The irony burned. Donovan had inherited a house, 18 months rent-free. Before that, I'd covered his college tuition, his first car, countless other things, through carefully anonymous channels. He'd inherited every advantage I could provide without revealing my resources. Must be difficult, Marguerite continued, making ends meet on a government salary. Do you have savings, retirement accounts? I'm adequately prepared. Percival leaned forward, but not enough to help with major expenses, I'd imagine. The moment crystallized. I saw where this was going. Donovan and Celestine, Percival continued, have been looking at houses, found a perfect place in Minnetonka, $720,000. Problem is, the down payment. They need about. He turned to me. Can you contribute, Matthias? Every eye in the room focused on me, waiting, watching for confirmation that I had nothing to offer. That's a substantial sum, I said carefully. Exactly what I thought. Percival's smile was triumphant. No offense, but government work doesn't exactly build wealth. Can't give what you don't have. Donovan sat silent. Not a word in my defense, not even a token protest. Celestine set down her wine glass. We've learned to be realistic about family resource. Well then, Percival stood, walked to Donovan's chair, placed a hand on his shoulder like a father claiming a son. Patricia and I will provide the $144 down payment. Call it a wedding gift. Can't have our daughter waiting forever for help that clearly isn't coming. Donovan's face transformed. Percy, that's incredibly generous. Thank you. Celestine rose to hug her father. Thank you, Daddy. Marguerite beamed. Some families help their children succeed. That's what real parents do. I watched my son accept another man as his benefactor. Watched him show more gratitude to Percival in 30 seconds than he'd shown me in 18 months of free housing. The parking instruction, the worn chair at the end of the table. All of it I could have forgiven, but not this silence, not this acceptance of my humiliation without a single word of defense. That's very generous, I said, my tone perfectly neutral. I'm sure they'll make good use of it. We moved through dessert, their elaborate pastries, not my pie. Conversation flowed around me like I was furniture. Percival's business deals, Marguerite's charity boards, Celestine's consulting expansion plans. Donovan contributed enthusiastically, animated in ways I rarely saw anymore. At 8:30 I stood. Thank you for the meal. I should be going. Percival barely looked up. Long drive back to your apartment. Not too long. Good, good. Drive safely. Marguerite's smile was dismissive. It was lovely having you, Matthias. Donovan rose halfway, then settled back. My dad. Not let me walk you out. Not drive safely. Just a quick dismissal. Eager to return to his real family. Goodbye, Donovan. I paused at the door. Enjoy your new house. I walked to my Honda alone. No one accompanied me. No one watched from the window. I sat in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, but not turning it. My hands were steady, my breathing even. The auditor in me was already organizing the evening into categories, documenting evidence, building the case file. 18 months rent-free in my house. Tonight's complete betrayal. Percival's hand on Donovan's shoulder, claiming him. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb. In my rearview mirror, the Sterling mansion blazed with light and laughter. I'd seen enough. The drive back took longer than usual. I stopped once at a rest area, sat in my car watching traffic flow past on I-49-4. My mind worked through the evening methodically, sorting data, identifying patterns. I reached my apartment at 10:15. The building was quiet. I unlocked my door, set my keys in the bowl by the entrance, moved directly to my desk. Documentation first. Always. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd started Monday, added a new entry. November 24th, Thursday, 6 p.m., 8:30 p.m. Location, Sterling residence, Edina. Present, Percival Sterling, Marguerite Sterling, Donovan Blackwood, Celestine Blackwood, Matthias Blackwood. I typed everything. Percival's comments about my car, Marguerite's questions about my finances, Celestine's contempt, Donovan's silence, the down payment offer, Donovan's gratitude, not to me, never to me, but to the man who'd spent the evening systematically diminishing everything I was. The words filled 4 pages. Clinical, precise, the way I'd write an audit report on financial malfeasance. When I finished, it was past midnight. I saved the document, backed it up, then sat back in my chair. 23 years of deliberately living beneath my means, teaching Donovan independence, 18 months of free housing, while he saved nothing. Tonight's complete betrayal. I pulled up my financial management software, stared at the numbers. Total assets $3,800,000. The house where Donovan lived rent-free $580,000. I had built this over 40 years of careful work, and my son thought it didn't exist. My son thought I was a failure who couldn't help him buy a house. I opened a new browser window, type, Minnesota inheritance law disinheritance. The results were clear. Minnesota allowed complete disinheritance of adult children, no requirement to leave anything. A properly executed will with explicit language would suffice. Second search, Minnesota eviction law, family members, more complex, but clear enough. 30 days notice for tenants without lease. 18 months of occupancy without rental agreement meant he was a tenant at will. Third search, transfer on death deed, Minnesota. A T deed would transfer property ownership upon my death, bypassing probate, avoiding complications. I spent the next 2 hours organizing documents, property deed, tax records, financial statements, 18 months of utility bills showing sole ownership. By 2 a.m. I had the framework, 2-pronged approach, both legally sound. 1. New will, explicitly disinheriting Donovan, everything to charity, organizations supporting foster children, kids who actually needed help. 2. Transfer on death deed for the house, also to charity. Donovan would need to vacate within 30 days of my death, but first, I wanted him out while I was still alive. I needed to see if he'd defend me, if he'd show remorse, if there was anything left worth saving. Friday morning, I called Augustus Thornfield, my attorney for 15 years, the man who knew everything about my finances. "Matt," he answered on the second ring. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I need to see you. Estate planning." "It's time." Long pause. "You've been talking about this for years. What changed?" "Thanksgiving dinner. I'll explain Monday. Can you fit me in?" "Monday, 10 a.m. And Matt, whatever happened, think carefully before you do anything permanent." "I've been thinking for 23 years. Monday." The weekend passed in careful preparation. I reviewed every document, every bank statement, every piece of evidence showing Donovan had lived rent-free while building nothing. Monday morning arrived cold and bright. Augustus Thornfield's office occupied the 15th floor of a building overlooking the Mississippi River. Professional but understated, he'd built his reputation on complex family law, estates, property disputes. He met me in his conference room, late 50s, graying at the temples, steady handshake. "Matt, you look determined." "I am." I set my leather portfolio on the table and opened it. "I need to disinherit my son completely and permanently. Can Minnesota law accomplish this?" "Yes, it can." He sat across from me, pen ready. "Tell me everything." I laid out the documentation, my handwritten notes from Thanksgiving, bank statements showing my account, property deed for the house, current will leaving everything to Donovan, financial summaries. I arranged them in stacks between us. My son showed me who he is when he thought I had nothing. Now he'll receive nothing. Augustus read through my documentation methodically. When he reached my financial summary, his eyebrows lifted slightly. "You have substantial assets, $3.8 million. The house alone is worth $580,000. Paid off. Donovan has lived there rent-free for 18 months. I slid another document across. This shows his income over that period. Combined with Celestine's earnings, they should have saved at least $180,000. They have nothing. Augustus nodded slowly. "You want this airtight? No loopholes, no opportunities for reversal." He pulled out a legal pad and began outlining options. For the house, he explained 2 approaches: life estate or transfer on death deed. TOD was cleaner, harder to challenge. For liquid assets, a new will was straightforward. Name any beneficiary, include explicit disinheritance language. "Who receives your estate?" Augustus asked. "The Minneapolis Youth Foundation. Scholarships for low-income students. Kids who actually need help." Augustus allowed himself a slight smile. "There's poetry to that choice. There's justice to it." He outlined the timeline. Draft new will, 1 week. Prepare TO deed, 1 week. Notarization, property appraisal, medical competency documentation, 1 week. Total timeline, 3 weeks to complete all documents. Once executed, Augustus emphasized, "These documents are extremely difficult to challenge, but I recommend additional documentation, dates, conversations, reasons for disinheritance. Consider a cognitive assessment from your physician. My annual federal health screenings are current, all normal." "Perfect. Bring those records to the signing." Over the next 3 weeks, I became intimately familiar with the process. Augustus sent drafts for review. I read each page carefully, requested specific language changes, additional provisions. The property appraisal required coordination. I called Donovan on a Tuesday evening. "Don, I'm having the house appraised next week. The appraiser will need access." "Appraised? Why?" "Insurance purposes. Routine property valuation." "Will you be home Thursday?" "No, I'll be at work. Celestine might be here. I'll coordinate with the appraiser. He'll be professional and quick." "This seems sudden. It's overdue." "Thursday at 2 p.m. Edmund Cross conducted the appraisal on schedule. I accompanied him. It was my property, after all. Donovan wasn't home. Celestine had left for a client meeting. Walking through the house felt strange. Their furniture, their decorative choices, their lives built in my space without payment or appreciation. Edmund measured rooms, photographed features, noted improvements. The appraisal came back at $580,000 fair market value. By mid-December, all documents were ready. Augustus scheduled the signing for a Wednesday afternoon. Harriet Montgomery's notary office occupied a corner of Augustus's law firm. Small desk, official seal, filing cabinets of recorded documents. 2 witnesses' law firm staff stood against the wall. Harriet reviewed my federal ID, verified my identity. She slid the new will across the desk. "Mr. Blackwood, I need to verify you understand these documents. This will revoke all prior wills and directs your entire estate to the Minneapolis Youth Foundation. Do you understand? Completely. And this deed transfers your property to the same foundation upon your death. Your son, currently residing there, is not a beneficiary. You understand this? I do. That's my intention. Please sign here, here, and initial here. I signed with deliberate strokes. Then the TOD deed. Harriet applied her seal. The stamp made a definitive sound. She handed me the documents. These are now in effect. The TOD deed needs county recording. The next morning, I personally walked the deed to the Hennepin County Recording Office. The clerk processed it efficiently, provided a stamped copy with the official recording number. I held the document, read the stamp. Real now. Permanent. The house would never be Donovan's. That afternoon, I returned to Augustus's office for our final meeting. All documents are executed and recorded, he confirmed. Your estate plan is now in effect. When do you plan to inform your son? After Christmas. I want him to enjoy one more holiday, believing he's inheriting millions. Augustus leaned back. That's remarkably restrained. I'm not acting from rage. I'm acting from certainty. I left his office carrying copies of every document. The originals were filed in Augustus's secure storage. Christmas came and went. Donovan sent a brief text, generic holiday wishes, no invitation to celebrate together. I spent Christmas organizing files, reviewing documentation, preparing for what came next. By early January, I was ready. I texted Donovan in early January. Brief, neutral, need to speak with you. Coffee Wednesday afternoon, downtown cafe on Nicolay. His response came hours later. Sure, what's this about? Better in person. Wednesday arrived gray with snow. I reached the cafe first, selected a corner table near the window, ordered black coffee, watched the street until Donovan appeared, walking quickly, shoulders hunched against the cold. He sat across from me, confusion evident. What's going on? You sounded serious. I sipped my coffee, let the moment settle. I want to tell you about something I did 23 years ago. A decision about how to raise you. Donovan frowned. Okay, when you were 9 after your mother died, I was making approximately under $80,000 annually as a senior federal auditor. I had a growing investment portfolio, significant savings, real assets. I could have given you anything. What would you do at this point? Write it in the comments. Your thoughts are as important as the story itself. His expression shifted, uncertain now. Instead, I chose to live modestly. Let you believe we had limited resources. I wanted you to learn independence, self-reliance, the value of work. I set down my cup. I wanted to see who you'd become without the cushion of obvious wealth. Donovan's face paled. What are you saying? I'm saying I currently have $2.1 million savings and investments, $980,000 in retirement accounts. I own the house where you live, $580,000 paid off. Total assets, approximately $3.8 million. The color drained completely from his face. You're joking. I'm telling you the truth I've hidden for 2 decades. The poverty you've been embarrassed by was strategic. The modest apartment, the old car, the worn clothes. Choices, not necessities. His hands gripped the table edge. Why would you? To see who you'd become, to understand your character. When you thought I had nothing, I kept my voice level, professional. Thanksgiving showed me everything I needed to know. Thanksgiving? He stopped. That was you accepting another man's money without defending your father. That was you sitting silent while the Sterlings systematically humiliated me. That was you telling me to park around the corner because my car was embarrassing. Donovan's mouth opened, closed. I didn't. You did, and I documented it. I removed an envelope from my jacket. 3 weeks ago, I completed new estate documents, a will disinheriting you completely, a transfer on death deed, removing you as beneficiary of the house. Everything goes to the Minneapolis Youth Foundation, scholarships for children from low-income families. I slid the envelope across. These are copies. The originals are executed, notarized, and recorded with Hennepin County, legally binding. Donovan stared at the envelope like it contained poison. You can't. I can. Minnesota law allows complete disinheritance of adult children. Augustus Thornfield, my attorney, ensured everything is legally airtight. His hand shook as he opened the envelope, scanned the documents. His face transformed shock, disbelief, dawning horror. This is because of Thanksgiving. Because I didn't defend you enough. That's insane. It's because of 18 months rent-free in my house. Because of every dismissive comment, every embarrassed glance, every moment you treated me like a failure. I leaned forward slightly. Thanksgiving wasn't the cause. It was the confirmation. Dad, please. I've lived in a $900 apartment while you enjoyed $580,000 of my equity. I've driven a 15-year-old Honda while you and Celestine saved nothing, despite earning one. You had every advantage and learned only contempt. Donovan's breathing quickened. I didn't know. How could I know if you never told me? Your ignorance of my resources doesn't excuse your treatment of who you thought I was. You accepted Percival's money without a word of defense for a father you believed was poor. That tells me everything about your values. I can change. You're 32, Donovan. Old enough to know better, old enough to have shown basic respect, regardless of my perceived finances. He pushed back from the table, stood, sat again. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. I need to. He answered it. Not now, Celeste. Her voice carried across the table, shrill and demanding. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was clear. Donovan's expression crumbled. He just told me he's got nearly $4 million. No. I didn't know. Of course I didn't know. He listened, his face reddening. He already did it. Legal documents, recorded, everything. Another pause. She was screaming now, actual screaming. Donovan pulled the phone from his ear, wincing. I need to go home. We need to talk about this. There's nothing to discuss. The documents are filed. My decision is final. Percival knows lawyers. Let him hire them. Augustus Thornfield specializes in estate law. Every document was prepared to withstand challenge. You can spend your savings on legal fees if you want. You'll lose. Donovan stood, swaying slightly. How can you do this? I'm your son, and you showed me exactly what that means to you. I stood as well, straightened my coat. The house is mine. The money is mine. None of it was ever yours. Despite 18 months of free living, and a lifetime of expectations. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my concern. You had 18 months to save money. You saved nothing. Those are your choices. Now live with them. I left the cafe while he was still standing there. Documents scattered across the table. His phone pressed to his ear. Celestine's voice cutting through the space between us. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. Across the street, through the cafe window, I could see Donovan collapsed back into his chair, head in his hands. I started the engine and pulled into traffic. The first blow had landed. Now I'd wait to see how they'd respond. 10 days passed. After the cafe meeting, I returned to my routine work, home, the quiet rhythm of my life. Donovan called twice. I didn't answer. Then the certified letter arrived requiring my signature. I knew what it was before I opened it. The postal worker waited while I signed. I thanked her, closed the door, and sat at my kitchen table. The envelope was thick, formal, bearing the letterhead of Whitmore and Associates, a prominent Minneapolis law firm. Donovan Blackwood, plaintiff, v. Matthias Blackwood, defendant. Contest of last will and testament. Claims of diminished capacity, undue influence, emotional instability, evidenced by sudden disinheritance of only child. I photographed each page with my phone, then called Augustus. "They filed," I said, when he answered, "Expected. Can you come in tomorrow morning?" The next day Augustus spread the filing across his conference table. He read it completely, occasionally making notes, his expression unimpressed. This is weak, he said finally. They're hoping to intimidate you into settlement. Minnesota law is clear. Competent adults can disinherit anyone for any reason. You have medical records, employment records, documented reasoning. This won't succeed. Fight it completely. That's what I hoped you'd say. Over the next week, I provided everything Augustus requested. Security clearance renewal from 6 months ago. Government background checks requiring psychological screening. Annual physical exam results, all normal, no cognitive decline. Performance reviews from the GAO, consistently excellent ratings. Augustus compiled it into a fortress of evidence. Whitmore and Associates is expensive. Augustus noted, someone with resources is funding this. Percival Sterling, Donovan's father-in-law. That explains the aggressive approach. The letters started arriving the second week of February. Handwritten, Donovan's familiar script on cream-colored stationery. The first one was 3 pages of rambling apology. Youthful foolishness, misunderstandings, promises to be better. The second referenced specific memories, teaching him to ride a bike at age 7. That father wouldn't abandon his son now. I read each letter completely, filed them in a folder labeled Donovan February 2025. Didn't respond to any. I recognized manipulation when I saw it. Mid-February, my phone rang. Unknown number, Matthias Blackwood. Matthias Percival Sterling. Let's talk man to man, businessman to businessman. What's your number? I switched the phone to speaker, started recording. My number? Everyone has a price. You want to leave money to charity? Fine. Name the amount you want for yourself, and we'll settle this. This isn't about money, Mr. Sterling. It's about character. Donovan failed a test he didn't know he was taking. Percival's voice hardened. Don't be naive. Everything's about money. You're just playing hard to get. $200,000. $300,000. You can't buy your way out of this. Goodbye. I hung up, saved the recording, emailed it to Augustus with a timestamp. The third call that week came from Celestine directly. First time she'd ever called me. Matthias, it's Celestine. I'm calling because I think we all need to take a step back. We're family. Subscribe and stay tuned so you don't miss any true revenge stories. Sometimes, even silence is the strongest form of revenge. We became strangers at Thanksgiving. This call doesn't change that. Her voice shifted, sweeter, almost pleading. I'm trying to apologize. Can we have dinner? Talk properly? Your apology is motivated by money, not remorse. The answer is no. You're being unreasonable. Donovan is your only child, and he showed me exactly what that means to him. Goodbye, Celestine. I hung up. She called back immediately. I declined the call. She called 3 more times that evening. I blocked her number. Augustus filed our counter motion in late February. The documentation was overwhelming. 40 years of federal employment, annual competency reviews, medical records, my written analysis of Donovan's behavior from Thanksgiving onward. The estate planning process itself demonstrates competence, Augustus wrote in the filing. Ms. Blackwood researched Minnesota law, consulted legal professionals, made informed decisions over multiple weeks. These are not the actions of someone with diminished capacity. The hearing was scheduled for early March. I dressed in my work suit, professional, appropriate for a senior federal auditor. Augustus met me outside the courtroom. Stay calm, answer questions directly, show them exactly who you are. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected. Donovan sat at the plaintiff's table with his attorney from Whitmore and Associates, a man in his 50s, expensive suit, practiced confidence. Celestine sat in the gallery behind them. Percival wasn't present. The judge was a man in his 60s, Judge Harold Morrison, according to the nameplate. Donovan's attorney presented first, claimed my sudden disinheritance, indicated emotional disturbance. Argued no rational parent would cut off their only child without cause, suggested I'd been influenced or coerced, though he couldn't identify by whom. Augustus countered with documentation, passed my employment records to the judge, my security clearance renewal, annual physicals, performance reviews, my handwritten notes from Thanksgiving, dated and detailed. Mr. Blackwood is a senior federal auditor, Augustus stated. He passed rigorous background checks 6 months ago. He has documented his reasoning clearly. He planned this estate change methodically over months, consulting professionals, making informed decisions. This is textbook competence. Judge Morrison reviewed the materials, then looked at me. Mr. Blackwood, you changed your will after 40 years. Can you explain this decision? I met his eyes, spoke clearly. Yes, Your Honor. I kept my financial status private to teach my son independence. At Thanksgiving, I learned how he treats people he believes have nothing. His character, when tested, was found wanting. This seems like a harsh response to a single dinner. It wasn't a single dinner, Your Honor. It was 18 months of taking without gratitude, culminating in one evening where he showed his true values. I documented everything. He studied me for a long moment. You appear quite competent to me, Mr. Blackwood. Thank you, Your Honor. He reviewed Augustus's submissions again, then Donovan's attorney's filings. The courtroom was silent except for rustling paper. Finally, he looked up. I've reviewed the evidence. Mr. Blackwood is clearly competent. He has documented his reasoning. Minnesota law permits disinheritance. The will stands as executed. Challenge dismissed. Donovan's face crumbled. His attorney gathered his papers quickly, professionally masking his defeat. Celestine sat frozen in the gallery. Outside the courthouse, Donovan called across the lobby. Dad, please, just talk to me. 5 minutes. I paused for 1 second. Let him see me, hear him, acknowledge his presence. Then I continued walking. Augustus fell in beside me, creating a physical barrier. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. The legal challenge had failed. Percival's money had bought them nothing but expensive legal fees and public documentation of Donovan's failure. I drove back to my apartment. The victory felt appropriate, not celebratory. The system had confirmed what I knew. My decision was sound, my reasoning valid, my actions legal. But I knew they wouldn't stop completely. The will was secure now, court-tested and approved. That left one remaining asset, the house where Donovan and Celestine lived, rent-free. I suspected that would be their next battlefield. I was ready. 3 weeks passed after the court victory. I returned to work, completed my quarterly audit reports, maintained my routine. Then on a Tuesday evening in late March, I called Augustus. I want to reclaim my house. Augustus was quiet for a moment. The property where Donovan lived, the property I own, where Donovan has lived without lease or payment for 18 months. Minnesota law requires 30 days notice for termination of tenancy. You'll need to deliver written notice, document delivery, then file for eviction if he doesn't vacate voluntarily. Draft the notice. Augustus prepared the document that week. It was formal, legally precise. Notice to terminate tenancy, effective April 1st. Donovan Blackwood has 30 days to vacate the premises. No cause required under Minnesota law. Property owner exercising rights. On April 1st, I drove to my house at 10 hours in the morning. Donovan's car was gone. He'd be at work. Celestine's Lexus sat in the driveway. I knocked on my own front door. Celestine answered, confusion crossing her face. Matthias, what are you? I'm delivering legal notice. I handed her the envelope. 30 days to vacate. You and Donovan need to be out by May 1st. She stared at the envelope. Vacate? This is Donovan's house? This is my house. I bought it 20 years ago, paid it off 10 years ago. Donovan has lived here, rent-free by my permission, which I'm now withdrawing. Her face went white. You can't just kick us out. We have rights. You have 30 days. Read the notice. It explains everything. I turned to leave. You're making a mistake. Her voice rose. Percival will fight this. I looked back. Percival's money couldn't overturn the will. It won't stop a property owner from reclaiming his own house. May 1st. Be out. I walked to my car, photographed the house and my visit, noted the time and date. Documentation. Augustus filed the eviction action mid-April, exactly as required when Donovan and Celestine didn't respond to the notice. The court scheduled a hearing for late April. The hearing was procedural, quick. I presented the property deed showing sole ownership, documentation that Donovan had never paid rent, had no lease, occupied by verbal permission only. The notice to vacate, delivered April 1st. Donovan's attorney, different firm, less expensive than Whitmore and Associates, argued that 18 months of occupancy created some form of tenancy right. Judge Reynolds rejected it immediately. No lease, no rent, no documentation of any rental agreement. This is permissive occupancy which the owner can terminate. 30-day notice was proper. I'm ordering the tenants to vacate by May 1st or face forcible removal. Donovan sat rigid in his seat. Celestine wasn't present. Outside, Donovan approached me in the parking lot. "Where are we supposed to go?" I unlocked my car door. "That's not my concern. We can't afford first and last month's rent on a decent place, not with the legal fee. You had 18 months of free housing to save money. You saved nothing. Those are your choices, Donovan. Live with them. You're enjoying this, watching us suffer." I met his eyes. "I'm not enjoying it. I'm implementing it. There's a difference." I drove away. In my rearview mirror, Donovan stood in the parking lot, defeated. May 1st arrived on a Thursday. I drove to the house at noon. A moving truck sat in the driveway, nearly empty. Donovan and Celestine were carrying the last boxes out. I parked on the street and waited. Let them see me watching. The moving truck departed at 1:30. Donovan's car followed it. Celestine's Lexus left minutes later. I waited another hour, then approached the house. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the house was empty except for scuff marks on the floors, nail holes in the walls, the ghost impressions of furniture on the carpet. They'd taken everything, left nothing. I walked through each room. The bedroom where Donovan had slept for 18 months. The kitchen where Celestine had cooked meals in my house, without appreciation. The living room where they'd built their life on my generosity, while learning to despise me. In the master bedroom, I found a note on the floor, Donovan's handwriting. "You won. Are you happy?" I picked it up, read it twice, then put it in my pocket. I wasn't happy. Happiness wasn't the goal. Justice was the goal. Consequences were the goal. I locked all the doors, checked all the windows. The house was secure, empty. Mine again. My phone buzzed. Text from Augustus. "Confirmed they're out. Property is yours." I texted back. "Confirmed. Thank you." I stood in the empty living room for a long moment. 8 years ago, I'd bought this house, thinking Donovan might live here someday, raise a family here, build something last. Instead, he'd used it as free lodging, while saving nothing, and learning contempt. I drove back to my apartment. The house was mine again. The inheritance was secured. The legal battles were over. Donovan had nothing left to take, nothing left to contest, nothing left to expect. I listed the house in early May. The market was strong. It sold within 2 weeks for $59. Cash buyer, no complications. Closing costs netted me $580,000. I never visited the house again after May 1st. The agent handled everything. When the sale closed in late May, I signed documents in Augustus's office, accepted the check, and completed the transaction without seeing the property. The money transferred to my account, $580,000, that would never reach Donovan. I decided weeks earlier where it would go. The Minneapolis Youth Foundation occupied a modest office building downtown. I scheduled a meeting with their director, Elena Rodriguez, for early June. "Mr. Blackwood, thank you for coming in. Your donation inquiry was intriguing." I'd outlined my intention in the initial email. Now I explained fully. "I'm donating the proceeds from a property sale, $580,000. I want it used for college scholarships for students from low-income families. Full 4-year funding for as many students as the amount allows." Elena's expression shifted from professional interest to genuine surprise. "That's remarkably generous. May I ask what inspired this? I believe in giving opportunities to young people who will appreciate them, students who understand the value of education because they've had to fight for it. She nodded slowly. We could fund approximately 12 full scholarships with this amount, 4 years each. Tuition, books, basic living expenses at Minnesota public universities. 12 lives changed. That's sufficient. We worked through the details over the next hour. The foundation would manage selection and distribution. My name would remain confidential. No publicity, no recognition. Would you like updates on the recipients? Elena asked. No, I trust your judgment. Beyond that, I don't need to know. She studied me curiously. This is unusual. Most major donors want involvement. I'm not most donors. The money has a purpose now. That's acknowledgement enough. I signed the donation paperwork, transferred the funds, and left with a simple receipt. $580,000 redirected from a son who'd wasted advantages to 12 students who'd earned them. The letter arrived 3 weeks later, formal acknowledgement from the foundation. 12 scholarships funded, names withheld per my request, but brief descriptions included first-generation college students, foster care survivors, children of single parents working multiple jobs, young people who understood struggle and valued opportunity. I read the letter once, filed it in my desk drawer, and didn't look at it again. September brought routine, work, home, the quiet rhythm I preferred. I heard nothing from Donovan, no calls, no texts, no letters. The silence was mutual and appropriate. Through indirect channels, my colleague Quincy mentioning something he'd heard, I learned fragments. Donovan and Celestine were in a small apartment in St. Paul, marriage strained but intact. They paid their rent, managed their bills, lived without safety nets or wealthy benefactors. They were learning what independence actually meant. I felt no satisfaction hearing this, no triumph, just confirmation that consequences were real and being faced. One afternoon in late September, Quincy stopped by my cubicle. Roland, you seem different lately. More settled, maybe. I looked up from my computer. Do I? Yeah. Whatever was bothering you last year seems resolved. Some situations required attention. They've been addressed. He nodded, understanding I wouldn't elaborate. Good for you, man. After he left, I considered his observation. Was I different? Perhaps. I'd removed toxic relationships, enforced boundaries, ensured my resources would serve worthy purposes. The weight of disappointed expectations was gone. October arrived with early cold. I walked to work when weather permitted, drove when it didn't. The house was someone else's home now. My will was filed with Augustus, legally sound, court-tested. 12 students would begin college next fall with full funding. Everything I'd intended to accomplish was done. One evening, I closed my laptop after finishing the day's work. Outside my window, Minneapolis lights sparkled in the darkness. Somewhere in this city, my son struggled with consequences he'd earned. Somewhere else, 12 young people prepared for opportunities they'd been given. I felt no need to know more than tomorrow would bring more audits, more reports, more routine. That was exactly what I wanted. The story was over. The justice was done. The rest was simply living. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.